All right. So the goals of today's coaching is we're going to try to build a solid default turn strategy that is easy to implement. So basically, I'm going to try to give you some tips and then some like basic concepts of if you go into a certain spot and then you're unsure and then you're telling yourself, okay, what sizing should I be using? Like, what should I be betting here? I'm going to help you guys trying to figure that out all on the spot. So if you are ever unsure about what type of sizing, what type of strategies you should be using, then you can come up with a pretty solid strategy in play. We're also going to try to build a solid thought process about how to approach turn, barreling in different scenarios, basically what I just mentioned. We will be focusing again in wide ranges scenarios. So every time we did a coaching, we always talked about wide ranges spot. In one of the first webinar, we talked about which situation should we be studying first. But yeah, so what I was going to say is that like if we want to be improving in a certain situation, we have to focus on the situations that actually will have the biggest impact on your strategy and on your win rate. So those are usually the wide ranges scenario. So when we talk about C betting now, focusing on button versus big blind makes a lot of sense, and blind versus blind makes a lot of sense. So when we're going to be talking about turn strategy, we're going to be talking about button versus big blind and blind versus blind. We're also going to cover some important factors to consider when trying to decide turn sizings. I already mentioned that. And then we're going to talk about some exploitative adjustments, and we're going to do some hand review from members. I also have a section which is going to be some kind of like a quiz time. So we're going to do like a small quiz, but I'm going to pick some hands that I personally played, and we're going to try to decide what should be my bet sizing on the turn. How should I approach turn situation after we took a look at everything. So let's get into the meat of the subject. There's a couple important questions that you need to ask yourself once you have a turn decision to make. The first one is, who is the turn helping, and how does both ranges connect with that card? So basically what happens is that whenever the turn card really connects with the board and really connects with big blind's range, usually it's not a spot where we want to use really big sizings. Because we're basically saying, okay, this turn really helps you. You make some flushes, you make some two pairs, some straights, and all that type of stuff. And I still want to be betting something like a strong top pair. So basically what I want to be doing is I want to take a sizing that fits well my betting range, and also acknowledge the fact on how it connects with big blind's range. So basically, if the turn is a blank, we can afford to be putting a lot more money with our value range than if the turn connects super well with the big blind's range. So second question you need to ask yourself is, what should my value range be? So, I mean, if it's a spot that you want to be betting super aggressively, I mean, you're not going to be having the same sizing as is the spot you are actually facing. You are betting a super tight range. So those kind of questions about like, okay, how wide am I going to be value betting on the turn here can really help you try to decide like what sizing really fits your range well. And the third sizing is the third question, is what is the sizing that my value range prefers? So the sizing, like I just mentioned, really depends on how wide or narrow we want to be value betting. Now let's move on to the other one. Okay, so now I already talked about that, but what I want to say is that you should be using one sizing for your entire turn betting range. We talked about it on the flop, where, okay, when we choose a sizing, we should be betting our entire range with that specific sizing. And again, I want to put some emphasis on that in the sense that if you start splitting your range on the flop, it's going to be really hard for you to balance both sizings and the checking range on the flop to the turn to the river. So what I strongly suggest, and I cannot put more emphasis on it, I know I'm probably annoying you guys to actually talk about that every coaching, but I think it's super important. We have to use one sizing for our entire betting range on the flop, and then one on the turn, and then on the river, we can start splitting our range between two sizing. And I think the most important reason for that is that when you use one sizing for the flop and the turn, you're going to have a super good idea about what you get to the river with and how to split your range and put which hands into the big size, which hands into the smaller side. If you start splitting already on the flop, I mean, you're going to have absolutely no idea what you get to the river with. And I mean, it's understandable because it's really complicated. Yes, Amar, I'm saying Yumi. I mean, one sizing for a specific turn card. So for example, on a specific turn, we might only overbet or check with our betting range. And on another turn card, we could just bet something like 2/3 or 3/4 spot. But when we bet, let's say overbet, we only overbet. And then when we bet 3/4, we only bet 3/4. Young Dai saying, what about when the board pairs on the turn? Yeah, I mean, that's what we're going to be talking about that. So basically, like in solvers, when you're taking a look into certain spots, you're going to see that like solvers like multiple sizings, right? So we have to take into account basically like those questions I just talked about, and also what makes the most sense for our value range and our betting range. Yes, always there's going to be some hands in your range that would like to bet smaller, bigger. That's totally normal. But we want to try to maximize the EV of our entire range. And then on the river, let's say a hand wanted to bet bigger on the turn because, I mean, it's at the top of your value range. Then that's why we start splitting on the river. And then we can add an overbet strategy as well as a standard 2/3 to 3/4 spot strategy. And also what we're going to do next month is we're going to be talking about river play and which sizing to split your range on the river, like what type of hands to put in the smaller size, which hands to put in the bigger size, and all that type of stuff. Okay. 859906 is asking, what about when we play versus fish? I usually just play my hand, and you should keep doing that. I mean, when we play, like all the things we talk about here is to try to build a good solid strategy. So to try to build a good default strategy so that you know how to approach most situations. When you are actually facing a weaker player or a recreational, I mean, do we want to be playing our range? No. We want to be playing our hand, and you basically play your hand face up and you bet the amount that your actual hand wants to bet. So you try to maximize the EV of your hand because you're playing against a weaker player, and he's not gonna adjust versus the sizing. He's not gonna notice if you bet smaller or bigger with a certain type of hand. So basically, you just play your hand. You play super basic, and it's quite easy. But what we want to do here is we try to build a pretty solid strategy and how to approach. And then when we see, okay, we're facing a pretty bad player, then we say, okay, my default strategy would be to overbet with my entire range here, but I'm going to play exploitatively, and then I'm going to bet this sizing or this sizing because I'm facing a weaker player. So yeah, does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, so let's move on. So now we're going to be taking a look into button versus big blind first. So in position, it's one of the most important spots to master. It will have the most significant impact on your win rate. If you can play this spot like a beast, I mean, you're just going to be making a lot of money because, I mean, it's a situation that comes up quite often, and you're playing in position versus a big blind's capped range. We can put a lot of pressure there. A lot of the concepts can be applied into other spots as well. So you guys are going to see that we're going to be spending a bit more time in position than out of position, because the only reason is that a bunch of the concepts are actually true for both. We're going to see some small differences. Also, we're not going to be covering all the boards into this coaching because I didn't want to make this coaching too long. I want to make sure that it's a duration that you guys are still actively listening and actively implicated in it. So basically what I did is I left a couple situations that I already started preparing it, but I'm going to be releasing a video shortly, which will be covering the other spot for barreling turn as well. So basically we're going to be focusing into c-betting turn after in situations that we c-bet our entire range on the flop. So we are on the button, we c-bet our entire range on the flop, and then we're looking to bet turn. So we're going to be taking a look into 3 situations. And now let's take a look at the first situation. So we open the button, big blind calls. Board is ace, 8, deuce, flush draw. We are c-betting range for 1/3 pot. Big blind calls, and then the turn is the 6. So the first question we ask ourselves is, who is the turn helping and how does both ranges connect with that card? So would you guys say it's a good or bad card? Or neutral? Okay, so I'm happy to see that nobody said that it's a bad card, because I mean it's a pretty good card in the sense that some ace-6 off improves, right? Ace-6 suited as well. Some ace-6 suited. It doesn't really have ace-6 off. It doesn't really have deuce-6 suited as well. So it's. We have 8-6 suited as well. We have all the things that he improves to. We all have. Plus we have all the really strong hand as well, all the strong pocket, the top pairs that he doesn't have, like ace jack. Plus we have pocket aces as well. So it's a spot that, would you guys feel comfortable putting in money or not really? Yeah. Okay. So we target the first question. So basically, it doesn't really improve big blind's range. It's pretty neutral. So we can say that it's a good card for us because we have a range advantage. Now, the second question should we ask is, what should my value range be here? What do you guys think? Should we be betting wide? Should we be betting tight? Should we still be betting something like 8x, pocket nines? All right. So I see that a lot of you guys have the right thought process. Those spots, okay, we have to take a look into both ranges. So whenever we actually see bet here on the flop our entire range, we will get to the turn with a wide range, right? So we will still have our entire opening range on the turn. When big blind actually calls, he's going to have folded a big portion of his range, right? So he's going to have folded some stuff that didn't connect with it. Even it's going to be we can agree that big blind's going to be overfolding as well. So, he's going to get to the turn with a pretty strong range, and we're going to be getting to the turn with a pretty wide range because we actually c-bet our entire range. So it's not a spot, especially when the board is high, that we can just go and bet super wide here. Whenever we c-bet range on ace-8 deuce rainbow, we get to the turn with a wide range, big blind, he's going to have folded some stuff, and most of the population actually overfold. So he's going to get to the turn with a stronger range than he should. So that means that we have to polarize ourselves and bet something like a strong top pair or better. So a lot of you guys were saying something like ace 10 plus. I would even go with something like ace 9. Ace 9, I would still feel pretty comfortable into putting in as a pretty big bet. And what sizing would you guys use here? Okay, so I see a lot of you guys are using the overbet. I see couple 75%. Guys, what happens here is that my first question is this. When you are betting 1/3 pot on ace, eight, deuce flush draw, and we talk about your value range, like, did your value range lose value on the flop with the sizing that we choose? Yes. So on the turn, what happens is that we are not betting a wide range. We are betting a strong range. So we're not betting ace five. We're not betting pocket kings. We're not betting 8-7. We're only betting ace jack plus. And all that range lost value on the flop and wants to get it back on the turn. So it's using an overbet strategy on the turn. I mean, I would be super comfortable betting something like ace 9, ace 10 plus. Yes. Something like ace 9, ace 10, like definitely can go in the overbet strategy for sure. But that's basically the thought process behind it, is that when you're overbetting here, you want to get that value back that you lost on the flop. As far as the overbet size, I would try to use a sizing that still puts villain into a tough spot. So basically, I see a lot of people use like a 2x spot strategy. I think that's not the right strategy to go with. Why? The reason is that, like, we make villain's life pretty easy. Like, once we start betting so huge, like, he can even start folding hands like ace 3 or ace 4, if we go in with a 2x overbet on the turn, which is not what we want to do. So basically what I would do is I would stick with something like a 130 to 150 sizing. And then let's say the turn is a bit drier like this, right? So like doesn't bring second flush draw, like we could go something like 130. And then let's say the turn is like the 7 of clubs. Then we can just size up a bit on the turn, because there's going to be so many rivers that we cannot value bet anymore, that we want to charge big blinds range on the turn. So something between 130 and 150, I think, makes a lot of sense here. Okay, if people overfold to overbet, do we not overbet so we can extract more value? That is a really good question, Alfred. Exploitatively, so this is like again, we're always talking about like a default strategy, how we should approach certain situation. If you know that people are actually overfolding massively versus the overbet, I mean, there are some spots that in my overbetting range, it's going to be super bluff heavy, because I think that people are overfolding versus that. So I'm going to be bluffing quite a lot there. And then I'm going to be using a smaller sizing with my value range, because I want to make sure I get called. But again, this is exploitatively. I think it makes a lot of sense, Alfred, to switch some value hands to the smaller sizing or to the bluffing range with the bigger sizing, if you think that people are overfolding quite a lot. But I mean, you need to make sure you have a read for that. And yeah, but it's a really good thought that you had. Young guy saying, is out of position still on cap though? I mean, yes, but he doesn't have that, like we have all the strong hands that he has. So we have the ace deuce, ace 8, pocket deuce. We have pocket sixes. We have ace 6 suited. So like maybe he's still uncapped, but the thing is that he's going to be raising some strong hands on the flop as well. So we can discount some really strong hand that he can have, but we are actually betting all of our strong hands on the flop. So we get to the turn with every strong hand, but he's going to get with maybe, I don't know, 60, 70%. Okay, what about draws? One piece saying, what about draws? I mean, like you're going to be betting, like, so basically here we're going to be betting a hand like ace 9, ace 10, ace jack plus, right? And then we're going to be betting the natural draws first. So if you have a hand like 9-7, if you have a hand like 7-5, a hand like 9-10, a hand like 4-5, those would bet first, and then we can have hands like flush draws as well. So we have plenty of natural bluffs here. So we don't need to go crazy and be betting hands like Jack 10 of heart, for example. Because we have plenty of natural bluffs. When we have less natural bluffs, we need to include more blocker type of hand. But in this specific turn card, with our buttons range being quite wide, we're going to have hands like 5-3 suited, 4-5, like 7-9, 7-5, all the diamond draws. So basically, like those are the first draws that you want to be betting. Yeah, Alex, Alex is asking on double flush draw, I would go 150. I still don't want to go like crazy big and just bet like 200 or 250% pot. Just because, we kind of make his life a bit easier. Okay, let me just check the other questions. Should you check slightly more hands if you use 150% sizing? It shouldn't change that drastically if you just go with 150 to 130. So like those details, like I would not really put too much thought into it because I don't think it's going to make a really, really big difference. So like even if you go 150 instead of 130, I think it's fine. As long as you don't go something like 200 and then you kind of make his life quite easy. What to do is asking, will you check back some weaker flush draws to be protected on diamond runouts? For sure. So basically, like we can start checking back some flush draws that actually have a bit more showdown value. So hands like king, queen of diamonds, we can start checking because we're gonna have a bunch of flush draws here. So we have to be careful about which flush draws we're gonna be betting. So basically, like we can start turning like some hands like 6-5 or 6-4 of diamonds, like a turn pair plus some flush draw. We can start turning those into a bluff on the turn. But the better ones like king 6 or queen 5, we can start checking, and then we can start checking some like king queen, king jack of diamonds, and then bet the lower showdown value ones. So we have to be checking some flush draws as well. And usually like the really weak flush draw, like really, really weak, we can start checking. Because those are pretty nice check back, and then we can bluff rivers with it, and then we can still have some flushes when the river completes the flush. And also, let's say we have like 5-3 of diamonds, for example, and then we overbet turn, and then the river's a flush, and then if all the money goes in on the river, we're pretty much always dead. So we try to build the pot like with flush draws that will dominate villain's flush draw. So I don't like building huge pot with weak flush draws because by the time that like you hit your hand and all the money goes in, you're going to be behind quite often. So hands like king 3, king 3 of diamonds, those are the type of hands I would be over betting for sure because we have less showdown value than king queen because let's say we have 2 overs to the 8, which is great. And then with king 3, we have a bit less showdown value. So basically, I would start over betting hands like king 3, king 4 of diamonds before king jack and king queen. Okay, let me just check. Okay, there's a lot of messages. Yes, 4 and 5 high flush draws. The weaker flush draws. 4-5, I would probably still bet because you have a double gutter to go along with it. So hitting a 7 or a 3 is great. But if you have a hand like, 3-4 of diamonds or 3-5 of diamonds, those would be candidate that I would start checking turn. Yes, we have a gut shot to go along as well, but we have like 5 high or 4 high flush draw. So it's quite cool hands that we can actually check back turn and then bet river, and also have some flushes. When a flush run out gets on the river. Also, we're still going to have some strong flushes, like some nut flushes, like king queen or king jack of diamonds. Because those are have more showdown value. Yep. All right. Yes, Cesar, we can still check behind a hand like 5-3 of diamonds, because you're going to have so many combo draws. Like you're going to have like 7-9 of diamonds, 7-5 of diamonds, 5-4 of diamonds is even better because you have double gutter. And you have 5-high flush draw, but you have at least a double gutter as well. So we have to be selective with our bluff. Also, we have to think about like, are we betting a wide range? Like, on the turn here, we're probably betting something like 25% of the time, because we use something like an overbet, and also we bet like ace jack or ace 10 or ace 9 plus. So that means that our range is quite tight, and we cannot just blindly bet all of our draws, because that way, we're just going to be over bluffing. Yes, Maldwin is saying if we have 7-9 off with the 9 of diamonds, or 9-10 off with the 9 of diamonds, those are pretty good candidates that we can start turning hands into a bluff. Because you need those, like, that's what happens when you're playing like people that are pretty face up and are playing at lower stakes, is that when you're betting, let's say this turn, you need to be betting all sorts of hands. So basically, like if you only bet like diamond draws, right? And like the 7 of diamonds gets there. Like 9-10 gets there, 4-5 gets there, all the diamond gets there. Like what else are you bluffing with? Like nothing. So you want to be betting hands like, let's say like 9-10 with the 10 of diamonds, so that like on completing flush runouts you still have some bluffs, or a hand like potentially like 6-5 of clubs that we can start over betting as well. Like turn pair, sometimes we can start over betting. So we need to start bluffing like a bunch of different hands on the turn, in order to be able to still have some bluffs on many different runouts on the river, which is not the case versus the players we are facing. So like when everything gets there, guys, just don't think about it and just overfold. Because if you're saying to yourself, villain needs to have like to turn like unnatural type of hands into a bluff in order to have some bluffs, those are the spots that we have to overfold massively. Eric is asking, do you bet no equity draws? On this turn, we have so many natural stuff, like so many natural draws, that we don't need to be betting a hand like Jack 10 of heart. Because we have plenty of natural bluffs to go along with. So the first hands that you want to be bluffing are always the natural bluff, which has some equity. The better bluffs, yes. So let's say the board is ace, 8, deuce, rainbow. Turn is a deuce. The only natural bluff we have is 3-4, 5-4, and 5-3. Those are the only natural bluff that we have. So in those situations, what you're going to see is that it's going to start using unnatural stuff like blocker type of hands to start turning into a bluff. So you would see a lot more like Jack 10, Jack 9, 10, 9 on ace, 8, deuce, turn deuce, rainbow. You would see a lot more of those blocker type of hands, because there's just no natural bluffs. So we need to start using like unnatural stuff. But on this specific turn, for example, like we have so many bluffs that we don't need to be betting no equity hands, if that makes sense. And you're asking, how do you pick them and what size do they prefer? I would bet the same size that my entire betting range is betting. So like if I choose 130% sizing, then I would bet my bluffs and my value range to that sizing. Yeah, but 6-7 off, we don't really open Maldwin. That's way too loose. So you could sometimes turn a hand like 6-5 into a bluff unit, some turn pair, some low turn pair. Like usually I try to pick my lowest showdown value. So let's say in this spot I have a hand like king 6. I would check king 6 of clubs, but I would sometimes overbet a hand like 6-4 of clubs or 6-5 of clubs. All right. So does anybody else have questions about this? What do you mean, Andre? Why not 2x? Yeah, I mean, deuce x is fine as well. Deuce x, I mean, we have to, we can use hands like hands like deuce 3 as well, something like that. Blocking 2 pair, those are some, but like on this specific board, I don't think it's doing that all that much. And the reason is that we have a lot of natural bluffs. So like in spots where we don't have natural bluffs or a lot of natural bluffs, we would need to start picking more like blocker type of hands or fourth pair or third pair type of hands. When you say sometimes, you mean like 50% or some other split? What do you mean, Lurie? When you say sometimes about what? If I... Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to like sometimes to mix it in the sense that like if I see a villain that I feel that I can be putting a bit more pressure on him, you know, then I could see myself maybe like starting to over bluff a bit more on the turn. Yeah, but lower pairs, Domingo, like lower pairs like 3s and 4, 3s to 5s are pretty bad bluffs because they have bad equity. So like 3s to 5s, like you're basically looking at like a 2-outer. If the turn was, let's say, a 5, yes, we can start overbetting hands like 3s and 4s for sure. But there, I would much prefer overbetting a hand like deuce 3 suited, because first of all, we block some really strong hands that he can have, like pocket deuces and ace deuce suited. Plus, if he ever has a hand like ace 10, we have a bit more equity. So we have 5 outs instead of 2 outs. Eric is saying maybe you have already addressed it, but what flush draw do you check back? Yes, exactly. And then we can bet the ones king, queen of diamond, king, jack, yes. And then the really weak one, like the 4, 5, 3 of diamonds, you know, those are the type of flush draws that we can check back. And then hands like king, 3 of diamonds, you know, where we have a bit less showdown value, we can start overbetting. I mean, Marquis, deuce X, like it's not a big part of villain's range. You know, like you shouldn't have all that much deuce X. So I mean, just having some bluffs. I mean, he's still gonna fold an 8 on the turn when we overbet there. You should not, but I think that like population is definitely folding an 8 versus the overbet on the turn there without like backdoor flush draw or something like that. Okay. Yes, Amar, I agree with you in the sense that like some people, that's what I mentioned before. I think some people will check raise their sets here, but that's why I also like turning some 6x into a bluff sometimes, because we block ace-6, we block 8-6 suited, and we block pocket sixes that villain should have. So in spots where we lack natural bluffs, like turning a hand like deuce X is fine. But in this spot, to be honest, like when we have plenty of natural bluffs, like I would turn some 6x into a bluff and not really deuce X here, because with like the 6-4 of diamonds, like blocking some 2 pairs and like something like that or turn set is better, because I still think that people will be check raising deuces or ace deuce at like at a decent frequency as well. Like I agree with you. Yes, but I'm just making like an example where like we can start turning some deuce X or bottom pair type of hands into a bluff on the turn. Like you just need to make sure that like we're not overdoing it. So if we have plenty of natural bluffs, we're not really gonna turn those like third pair, second, like fourth pair type of hands into a bluff. But yeah. All right, so let's move on to the next situation. Yeah, overbet size should be not too big, so 130 to. Yes, Maldwin. So again, this is the Pio solution. So we can see that like there's not really small betting going on. We see that like it really polarizes to ace 10 plus. So like even ace 9, I said ace 9. Ace 9 is not betting all that much. I think we can do either. So I mean, ace 10 plus, I think is totally fine. And then yeah, so we can start turning some hands like I talked about, like 7-5, 9-7, and yeah. So, I mean, it's a range that, like, if we have plenty of natural bluffs, I mean, it's pretty easy to play. I mean, we bet, like, strong top pair or better, or sets. Usually how I would approach it is that, like, top set would get checked back in a pretty good check back strategy. And also, I would be checking my worst two pairs. So, as you see here, like, ace deuce gets checked back, and all the other ones, like ace6, ace8, all those one gets bet. Yeah. So do you guys have any questions about this before we move on to the Andre? Yes, I do have a very good check back range on 500Z. And one of the reasons is that there are some people that are check raising like 25 to 30%. So you cannot just blindly see bet range. You cannot just blindly see bet range. And also, let's say, versus a check back, like some people will be like 2xing pot and like putting you in a lot of tough spot. So having some strong check back is super important. It's not as important for you guys because people will not do that. So it's really important, like we talk about like theory, how we should build like a pretty good solid strategy, but we have to make sure that we understand the player pool we are facing and we're not losing EV as well. All right, so let's move on. All right, so now ace-8 deuce, same situation. Turn is a 7. Now, what do you guys think about this? So the first question is, how does this card impact, is this card better for us or the big blind? And like, how those both ranges interact with that card? What do you guys think? Okay. Okay, you guys make some good point. Yeah, okay, so I mean, you guys make some good point where like when big blind defends, right, like he's gonna have a bunch of suited hands in his range. So once he calls, like, and the flush completes, he's gonna have a bunch of flushes. So we will still have some flushes as well, but do we only want, like, what size do you think makes sense here, like in this situation? Like, okay, small. Okay, so, okay, my other question is, okay, I think a better way to go around it is that, like, the second question is what is my value range should be. So what should be my value range? Sorry, man, I cannot speak English. Sorry about that. But like, what should my value range be here? Okay, 2 pair plus, okay. Top pair, top kicker with flush draw. I see some guys are being pretty needy here. I see some guys being a bit nitty, but it's fine. We're here to learn. So, okay, so if we take a look into big blind's range, okay, we know that he has a lot of flushes, but is he gonna have a bunch of like other stuff as well? I mean, he doesn't have a lot of like, he doesn't have only flushes in his range. He's gonna have a bunch of like hands like ace 3, ace 4, ace 5. He has all the ace X offsuit. That's a lot of combos. He's gonna have hands like 8, 9, king 8. He's gonna have hands like 9, 10, you know, or pocket 4s with a diamond, pocket 5s with a diamond. Like, yes, he's gonna have maybe 7, 8 off, but he's still gonna have hands like a ton of like weak hands in his range as well. So you think that now saying that the guys that answered that they were only betting 2 pair plus, do you think that still makes sense now to only bet 2 pair plus? What to do? Say no, I'm retarded. No, you're not. Just need some you just have some learning to do. Yeah, so basically so basically like we still want to be value betting here like a good top pair type of hands. So basically what we're going to be using is that like I don't want to be polarizing myself and betting big and just being able to bet something like 2 pair plus. I still want to be betting hands like ace 9, you know, to deny equity of hands like pocket 6s with a diamond, or like hands like 8, 9, or still get value from a hand like ace 5. And then we can check back the river, and also we can bet our really strong hands with this sizing. So by using a smaller sizing here, we kind of acknowledge the fact that, okay, this is still a pretty decent turn card for you because you're going to have some flushes, but I mean, I still want to be betting not super wide, but fairly wide. So we use a standard like 2/3 to 3/4 sizing. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, cool. Now, Alex Ballerino had a pretty good question. So is it because there's no straight draws completing, we can still bet wider? When I'm saying wider, okay, I'm not saying we are still betting pocket 9s with a diamond. I'm just saying that we're not only betting 2 pair plus. So we're still betting hands like, we can still bet sometimes a hand like ace 5 to check back, but I wouldn't do that too much. But I mean, we're pretty much going to be betting hands like ace 9 or ace 10 plus, and then we can bet to like 66, 70% sizing. And we have to think about like how bad is the card. So let's say the board is like ace 8 deuce, for example, or ace 8 6, and then the turn is a 7. I mean, that brings a lot of straights, 2 pairs there. That means that like we have to be checking quite a lot as well. So we have to be checking a bit tighter, checking a bit more there as well. So like, considering like how bad the card is, that's how we're trying to build our strategy. So this card is bad, but doesn't complete straights, maybe some 2 pairs, but we have about the same amount. And we're going to have pocket 7s as well. We're going to have some flushes as well. So, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable betting a hand like ace 9 for sure on the turn here. Okay. Marquis is saying, so small size even if we have a flush? Yes. So our entire betting range, if we have a set, if we have like 1 pair, if we have a bluff, if we have 2 napkins, we're betting like 66% pot or 70% pot. So we're betting that sizing with our entire range. And then on the river, what will happen is that we're going to be using like a 2/3 sizing again, and then we're going to be using an overbet strategy. And we're going to be splitting our range because now on the turn, like we talked about on the flop, some hands in our range actually lost value on the turn by betting like only 2/3. So they want to be getting that value back on the river. Amar is saying, does a diamond kicker increase betting frequency with top pair? I'm going to redirect the question back to you. What do you think? Yes. Yes. So the higher the equity you have, the more we want to be betting. So the higher the equity. So if we have the king of diamonds, the more we're going to be betting than if we had the five of diamonds. And the more we're going to be betting than if we don't have a diamond. Okay. Yes, August, definitely. Okay, let me just check. What are our bluffs on the turn? Carson is asking. I mean, we can have many bluffs. So, I mean, we're going to have hands like 9-10. We're going to have hands like 5-6, 5-6, Jack-10. We can have like hands like, I mean, those are, we can all have with a single diamond. So we have like hands like 4-5, 5-6, 9-10, Jack-10, and then the 9-10 and then the Jack-10. We have the offsuit combo. So I mean, we have plenty of natural bluffs to be choosing from. Sorry. Which flushes should we check back? Hands like king 3 suited. Usually I would check back some of my worst flushes. So again, like if you have a hand like 4-3 of diamonds, this is a pretty cool hand to actually check back, to have like to check back and then raise the river. And then like hands like you mentioned, like king 3, those would be the hands I would always bet. Because with a hand like king 3 suited, right, we actually unblock is really strong flushes. So having the 3 of diamonds is super good. So we have the nut flush, but having the 3, we unblock all of his like queen high flushes, jack high flushes, 10 high flushes. So if, for example, you have a hand like king jack of diamonds, then you block some of his really, really strong flushes as well. So, I mean, I would definitely prefer betting a hand like king 3 over king jack. But in your games, if I have king jack of diamonds, I'm definitely betting as well. What should be our best bluffs on the turn to barrel on the river when 4 diamond comes? I mean, that's why you need to be betting hands like 5-6 suited, 9-10 without a diamond. And then those would be the candidate to actually bet on the river. No, August is saying, like, should we bet straight draws and lower pairs? I mean, the thing is that, like, here, can we have plenty of natural bluffs? Yes. So do we need to really be betting a hand like pocket 3s without a diamond? No. So now if we can bet like a hand like 9-10 of hearts, for example, and then the river is a heart, we block some top pair type of hands, and also we can potentially have some bluffs on 4 to a flush. So in order to have like those like so this is another spot where, guys, like we have to be careful, right? Because whenever we are facing a player, okay, and then he bets here, like at lower stakes, when they bluff here, they have a diamond. So whenever like the 4th diamond comes on the river, like all of their bluffs actually gets there. So we have to be under bluffing. So this is why it's super important to have all types of bluffs on the turn. So hands like 9-10, 5-6, a heart, for example, because on the 4th diamond, we can actually still have some bluffs. Lurie is saying, why check back the worst instead of the best? I mean, we can do both. I mean, I would check back my really, really strong flushes and then my really, really weak flushes. So if I have a hand like king, queen of diamonds, for example, in theory, I would check that back, and then king, jack, I can see myself checking back, and then I would check back my really worst flushes as well. And then Lurie, the really best flushes you have, but that has a lower kicker, those are always bet. So let's say you have like an ace high flush, right? On like 8-7 deuce turn 3, like ace 5, for example, would always get bet. and then a hand like ace king, ace queen, we can sometimes check back because we also block some of his really, really strong flushes. And also this topic is going to be well covered into the river, where we actually split our range. So basically, like, just to give you a quick heads up, so let's say we bet 2/3 pot, right, on this turn, and then the river is like, I don't know, like the 4 of hearts, for example, okay? And then you're saying, okay, which hands should I be over betting? Like, which flush should I be over betting? Which flush should I be betting small, or whatever it is? Then the flushes, your really strong flushes that unblocks villains, really strong hands as well. So if you have a hand like king 3 of diamonds unblocking ace queen high, jack high, 10 high flush draws, not flush draws, but flushes, those would go in the overbetting range. If I had a hand like king 10 of spade, for example, which we block some really strong hands, like some really strong flushes that he can have, those could go into the regular 2/3. Or if we decide to bet a hand like king jack of diamonds on the turn, then we can use that in the 2/3 sizing again. All right. You guys are bombarding with questions, which is good. Edward, we're going to stick to the topic, as, I mean, it's like, if we start talking about all the situations, it's going to take a long time. I want to focus on really like the turn barreling here. All right, so let's move on. Yeah, so in general, when flush completes, we use a standard 2/3 to 3/4 sizing. And then I talked about it. Okay. So as you can see here, I posted the screenshot where, I mean, we're still betting something like 30%, and then we're still betting hands like ace 9 plus. Then it's still betting hands like pocket 3s, pocket 4s, mainly with a diamond. And then again, like hands like jack 10, jack 9, 10 9. We have the 10 9 off, jack 9 off. Those type of hands like queen 9 off with a diamond are getting bet. So we can have plenty of natural bluffs here. Hands like 9-6 of heart, for example, as well. Like, so we can have definitely a lot of bluffs. Now, I want to do a quick example of thought process when choosing sizing. So what, like here, what I want to be talking about is we open the button, the board is king deuce deuce, we see bet range, and then the turn is the 6 of diamond. Which sizing would you guys bet here? And try to think about the questions that we just talked about. So try to go through the questions in your head and then try to decide, should I be betting small or big? Okay, I see a lot of mix. Okay, Norris, you make a really good point. The deuce X is not really in his range, so we're going to be talking about that a bit later. Okay, so my question is this. How wide do you want to be betting here? What's like your thinnest value bet here on the turn? So I'm surprised that you guys don't want to be betting a bit wider than that. So when the turn is low, for example, like, do you still want to be betting a hand like pocket 5s? Like he's going to have like many hands, like he's going to have many hands like ace X. He's going to have some floats. Like he's not only going to have a king when he calls, right? I mean, like those hands, like, do they want to deny equity versus overcards? Like he's going to have hands like Queen Jack suited, Ace Jack, Ace 10, Ace 5, Ace 4. Like he's not going to fold all those hands. He's going to have hands like pocket threes, pocket fours as well. So like on the turn 6, we can still be pretty wide here. Like we can still bet a hand like pocket fives. We can still bet a hand like sevens. I mean, we want to get value and also deny some equity versus villain's calling range. Yes, he's going to have a king sometimes. But the thing is that like we will bet, like if we say, okay, we bet a bit wider, right? Like we can use something like a 2/3 sizing. So we use a 2/3 sizing, we still bet a hand like pocket fives, we deny some equity, and also we put his hand like ace X into a tough spot. Like if we just go ahead and bet 2x spot there, like, I mean, he's just gonna snap fold ace X and he's only gonna call deuce and a king. And he's even gonna fold a king sometimes because people are nits. So again, you have to think about like, how wide do I wanna be value betting here? So here on the turn 6, then I'm going to be using something like a 2/3 sizing in position. And then we can still bet like sevens, 6x sometimes, pocket fives, because those hands are pretty vulnerable and they want to deny equity versus overcards. I mean, if like Eric is saying, isn't ace X an easy fold versus 2/3? Yes. I mean, like it depends. It depends of like the villain you're facing. If he has a decently wide barreling, like I could see Pio actually check call some ace X as well, for sure. No, Young, like it's not really applicable in the other situation because on ace-high board, it's much different. First of all, there's no overcard to come, right? So the equities are a bit more locked up. So what I want to say by that, it's either you're going to have like a strong top pair or you're going to have a hand that is way behind and is drawing to like 5 outs or 2 outs. So on ace X, on ace-high board, it's a bit different. So on the turn, when we do is that we can use, like we need to use a more polarized strategy. Here, I'm doing this example on a specific turn where it's king deuce deuce, the turn is low. In those situations, like before, I was only polarizing myself to something like a king or better, but I thought that this wasn't like the right strategy. So like on the really low turn, so let's say the turn is a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, we can still be betting somewhat aggressively with a regular 2/3 sizing. Now, do you think the strategy shift if, let's say, the board, the turn is an ace, for example, or a queen? Now, do you guys think that we still want to be betting a hand like pocket fives, for example? No, exactly. So now we don't want to be really betting a hand like, so on a turn ace X, we don't really want to be betting a hand like pocket fives anymore. So now we're going to be a lot more polarized. But even then a queen turn, I'm just talking about a higher turn where we cannot, he's still going to have some queen X in his range. Yes, the ace is much worse, but I'm just talking about an overall plan, you know? Like he's still going to have like in his range, like some floats with queen high. I mean, he should, but so like on a queen turn, we're going to be betting less than on a 5 turn, for example, and then we're just going to be using a bigger sizing. Yes, I mean, I used to always overbet turn here, like not on low turn cards, for example. And I felt that like I could definitely be betting wider and I was losing a big part of like EV with like my medium strength hands where like I just like he can call the flop and then I just bet king X on the turn with an overbet. and I don't really put him in a tough spot. So like on those low board, and we're going to see also with the Pio sim that like it's actually betting quite often on the turn on a 6, and then it's quite different on an ace. I mean, Amar, like he's gonna have to call some ace-x as well versus the 2/3 spot for sure. So yeah, so on the ace turn, I mean, it's only gonna be over betting here. So again, like think about like how wide do I want to be value betting? Like on a 6, can we comfortably bet something like 5, 6, 6x, 7s, like king X, like king 4? Like yes. I mean, we want to be betting those for sure. So we use sizing that fits our range a bit better. So something like 2/3 spot. And then when the turn is higher, so it's an ace. I mean, are we still betting a hand like pocket 5s? No. I mean, we're going to be polarized. I mean, this example specifically is not great because the deuce is paired. So like pretty much all of the ace-x actually split. But let's say the turn is like king, deuce, 4, and then the turn is an ace. I mean, we would only overbet or check because we are only betting a strong top pair or better, and we're not betting hands like pocket 10s, for example. Sorry. All right, so we can see on the left here, on the left, we can see that like it prefers only the overbet, right? So like it's like all the sizings shift to the overbet. So like it's using some like ace 10 plus and then some bluffs. And then on the right, we can see that like the sizings actually shift to like it's blocking and also using like 2/3 spot. So like we can do a mix of like, I don't know, something like 60% kind of makes sense. And then we can see that like pocket 3s, pocket 4s, pocket 5s, 6s, 7, I mean 6s obviously, but 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Like those hands get bet at a higher frequency. Also, take a note into like pocket 3s will get bet at a higher frequency than pocket queens. Why? Because pocket 3s needs a lot more protection than pocket queens, for example. So a hand like, again, like the lower pocket pairs like 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s gets bet at a higher frequency than 10s, jacks, and queens. So the hands that we're going to be checking are the less vulnerable pocket pairs like 10s, jacks, and queens. And then the ones that are more vulnerable, right? So the 3s, 4s, 5s, all those gets bet at a high frequency. And then we can still bet hands like king 8 plus, for value, and then check our really bad kings and that type of stuff. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to explain here? All right, so let's keep moving on. Yeah, I'm digging a bit into what Amar has been saying, where like the deuce X is pretty irrelevant. Now, I think this example is not the best because on ace turn specifically, it's always going to be overbetting no matter what the paired card is. But we're going to be talking about that a bit later. But let's say the paired turn, the board is 9-9 deuce rainbow. The turn is a king. Then I would never use an overbet because the 9-9 is a lot more relevant than the deuce X, for example. But we're going to be talking about that right now. Now, so now we open the button. Board is ace 8-8 deuce rainbow. We are actually c-betting range here. Villain should be check raising quite a lot. But I mean, that's not what they're going to do. So basically we can get away with c-betting at a high frequency. But even without that, it's still c-betting like 8-8 deuce at a really high frequency. So now how do we approach turn on paired boards? What we need to be thinking about is how relevant the paired card is to big blind's calling range. So whenever the paired card is like 6-6x to ace-x, ace-x, we don't really overbet on turn because villain can still have plenty of plenty of trips in his range. So let's say the turn is a king or a 5, for example. I mean, we're still going to be wanting to bet hands like pocket 5, pocket 6s, 7s, 3s, ace deuce, like those type of hand, like pocket 10s, pocket jacks. We still want to be betting pretty wide. So, and also we have to acknowledge the fact that he's still going to have some trips. So basically, we use a regular 2/3 or regular 3/4 sizing. On other less relevant paired cards, so like deuce, deuce X, 3/3X, we can afford to be putting in more money into the pot. So for example, if the board is 8 deuce, turn 10, right? I would stick with a regular 2/3 sizing with my entire betting range. But if the board is, for example, 8 deuce, deuce, turn jack, then we can actually size up with our entire betting range and bet something like, I don't know, 90% or 100% pot. We're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be diving into that a bit more into the video that will be coming up shortly. Again, we have to think about how wide, narrow we want to be betting turn. So again, on the left, we can see that like on the 4 of heart, like, do we want to be betting wide? It's a bit like we just talked about. Like, how wide do I want to be betting here? Once we bet the flop, like hands like 3s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 9s, 10s, jacks, queens, like those hands want to be betting. Like if you have a hand like ace 4, if you have a hand like ace deuce, like all those hands wants to be value betting. So we want to choose a sizing that fits our range well. And also we acknowledge the fact that villain can still have a bunch of trips in his range, so we don't want to go crazy. David is asking, can you explain why 2/3 is appropriate here rather than 1/3? I mean, it's just because like we're in position. So we can always afford to be putting in a bit more money into the pot when in position. So overbetting doesn't really make sense here, but betting something like 2/3 definitely makes sense because we always have the luxury to check back on the river if we don't like the river card. And we get to show down instantly. But when we're blind versus blind, we're going to see that the sizing actually shifts. So really good question. Oh, you mean on the flop? I mean, because it's a really good board for us. So it's a super good board for us that we can bet super aggressively, and we can be betting our entire range for a small sizing. We talked about that, like maybe you weren't there for the last webinar where we talked about like how should we approach flop strategy. But okay, cool. So welcome, happy for you to be here. But so we talked about it where like in these type of spots where it's a really good board for us. I mean, we can be betting at a super high frequency with a small sizing. So we're basically betting our entire range here. No problem. All right, so we saw on the left that we can still be betting quite wide. I mean, we're still betting 60% of the time. That's super wide given the fact that like we still have a really wide range. On the turn here, on the right here, now on the ace turn, it's much different. We can see that it's actually like, this is quite surprising, right? Because at first do you guys find it quite interesting that we don't bet any ace-x on the turn here? I always bet those RIP. It's because, I mean, first of all, villain will have a lot of trips, and also villain's floating range, like once he calls the flop, is going to be a bunch of ace-x. So we have so he's going to have folded, like he's going to have like overfolded the flop. So he's going to have folded some hands. We get to the turn with a wide range. He gets to the turn with a stronger range. And also the card connects well with his calling range. So basically what happens is that we have to be checking quite a lot. And then when we do bet, we are actually over betting or checking. And then we bet like a really polarized range to trips or better. But this only happens on the ace turn. That's why I said previously that I thought that the example I actually did was not great in the Jimmy. Like I could have picked something like King Deuce 4 instead of King Deuce Deuce. Diego is asking, versus population that overfold the flop, can we still value betting so thin? Okay, so I'll redirect the question back to you again. Do you think that we're value betting thin here on the right? Or you're talking about the left? Yes, I mean, versus the left, you're totally right. When they overfold, we cannot be betting as wide for sure. But what I would do is that, like, even if he overfolds a bit, the general concept or the general idea of the situation is that we have to be betting. We have to be betting at a pretty decent clip. So let's say we're not betting like 60% of the time. We might be betting 45%. So we can just start by checking a bit more hands like queens. And then, I mean, I would still bet hands like 5, 6, 6s, 7s all the time. You know, probably not bet a hand like ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, you know, so like those hands that are actually going for really thin value. You know, like we can actually start checking back a bit more. But the general idea behind it is that we still want to be denying equity, so we can still be pretty wide. Maybe not that wide, but we have to be like checking back 80% there. I think is a mistake, because we can always just check back, you know, with our pocket sixes, pocket sevens, and all that. Okay, so Zanker is saying, are we never checking any trips on the left? So yeah, this is a common concept where in spots that we are actually betting aggressively, the strong hands actually get bet at a high frequency. So hands like let's say we would actually bet something like, I don't know, like a bit less than 60%, then those hands would get fast played a bit less. And in spot, for example, where you would check a bit more, then you would start slow playing a bit more as well. But I think like in this situation, it's kind of like a unique situation where like it's a trip board that is relevant to both. But in general, like let's say once you work with solvers and let's say you have like a situation that you only bet 20% of the time, you're going to see that like Pio is slow playing quite a bit as well. So it's going to be slow playing quite a lot of strong hands, which I would not really advocate, because once you start taking a look into like, okay, like he's checking like middle set in a 3-bet pot on like, let's say the board is like ace, 8, deuce, rainbow, small blind versus button, and you see bet your entire range on the flop. Like you need to be checking something like 80% of the time on the turn, and then it's checking like 100% of eights. It's checking like all the 2 pairs and all that. But once you start taking a look into button strategy facing a check, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like people are not bluffing that much and they overfold and all that. So like I would just try to fast play a bit more if I was in your shoes. So, I mean, the general idea I wanted to say is that like the higher we want to bet in terms of frequency in general, the higher the strong hands will be bet. And the more we want to be checking in a certain spot, the higher the lower the frequency at which the really strong hands will be bet. All right. So now let's let's get into some basic concepts. So in general, when turn is a complete blank, it's usually a clear overbet or fold spot. So let's say like the board is queen 10 deuce, turn 4. It doesn't really change anything. So when we do, we want to be betting with a polarized range. And we use polarized strategy with a big sizing. When turn is not a blank and brings like a lot of two pairs, a lot of straights, especially with the offsuit combos, we can then size down with our entire betting range. So same thing on flush turns, example like queen 10 deuce, turn 9. We can, like, he's going to have a bunch of like queen 9, 10, 9, jack 8 suited, king jack off, all those type of hand that he's going to have in his range. So I'm still going to be betting a polarized range on the turn. I mean, it's not like we can just be betting a hand like 9x or 10x on the turn. I mean, we're still going to be betting like a strong top pair or better. So, but again, his range connects really well with that board. So instead of going with maybe like, I don't know, like 140% pot, if the turn was a 4, I'm probably going with something like 90% pot or something like that. A sizing that I still can value bet, but like I still acknowledge the fact that it's a pretty good turn card for him. Yes, this is especially true out of position blind versus blind. We'll be covering that soon. Also, guys, make sure that you don't overbet so big that you cannot value bet a good top pair type of hand on the river. So I see a lot of people where like they overbet like 2x spot on the turn, and then they're like pretty strong top pair type of hands. I mean, like you isolated villain's range so much that like you cannot even value bet that on the turn. I mean, unless it's a really wet turn, there's 2 flush draws, multiple straight draws, all that type of stuff, and you think that like, okay, on the river, I will not be able to be value betting a whole lot, then sizing up to like 150 or even 175 on the turn, I think is fine in those situations. But like on a dry turn, like going super big, you just start to make villain's life easy because he just needs to fold more, and also you isolate his range a bit too much, so you can even value bet like a hand like a strong top pair, good kicker type of hand. Also, in some spots, Payo is using like really big overbets. So let's say the board is 7 for deuce rainbow. Turn jack, it's using like 2x spot in those situations. But like, again, like exploitatively, I think using a smaller overbet in general will be a better strategy. People will still overfold, and we don't want to go too big. That will make his life easy. Does anybody have questions? There's also, like I just mentioned, there's going to be other situations as well. There's a few situations that I'm going to be taking a look over into the video I'm going to be releasing soon. But do you guys have any questions about that so far? Yes, Luria, I think that's a good question where, like, if you're playing in a really big pool, right? You're playing in a really big pool. So you're playing 50 Zoom, there's 300 entrants. People will not really notice that. So, like, if you build yourself a good default strategy, but you know that, like, you overbet with bluffs and you're unbalanced because people are overfolding versus that, and then you're using, like, a 2/3 sizing or 3/4 with your value range, I think it makes some sense, but make sure that like you do it versus people that will be unaware of, or if you're playing against a really big pool as well. But yes, I do think it's I think it makes some sense. No problem. All right. So let's move on to the other position segment now. So general guidelines. After c-betting the flop out of position, we're talking about when we c-bet our entire range. We need to be checking a lot more than button versus big blind. So there's a lot of spots where, as the button, we can be betting like 60% of the time, or 50% of the time, or 40%. Like that drops down quite a lot when we are out of position in blind versus blind situation, especially on high boards. Like once we bet the flop with our entire range, and we get called, like we have to be checking, like in general, about around 80% of our range. And that would be even more if people are actually overfolding, and which is the case. So like that would be like in real life even more than that, because like Pio versus Pio, or solver versus solver, I mean, it's not overfolding, it's playing the best strategy it can, but like people that we are facing are actually not doing that. So like they're going to be overfolding. So we're going to be it's a bit like it's always the same concepts. It's like when somebody in the big blind overfolds, we start raising super wide from the small blind. So we start raising like a really wide range. So when he calls, like we cannot just go crazy by c-betting too much, because we're getting to the flop with a really, really wide range, and he's getting to the flop with a really, really tight range. So all the EV we basically made from him overfolding pre-flop, if we start just barreling like crazy, I mean, we're just giving part of it back to him. It's again the same thing, where once we see bet the flop full range, he's going to be overfolding. So we get to the turn with a pretty wide range, and he gets to the turn with a tighter range. So that means that we want to be checking quite a lot. August is saying, okay, cool. So we need to keep control of the size of the pot. So using smaller overbet makes sense. So like, let's say we talked about using like 130 to 150 sizing when we were on the button. When I'm on the button, when I'm on the small blind, I usually stick to like a 110 overbet. So pot size to 110 overbet when I want to use a big size when I'm out of position. So, I mean, we kind of say, okay, I'm polarized, but I don't want to be making the pot too big that it's going to be hard for me when I'm out of position, because I don't have the luxury to check back. So the situation one, small blind versus big blind. All right, so situation one, ace 9-3, turn jack. Again, what would be your strategy here, guys? Yes. So, I mean, like on the higher boards like that, like we just talked about it. I mean, how wide do I want to be betting here? Do I still want to be betting 9x, jack x? Not really. So basically what happens is that I'm going to be betting a strong top pair or better. And we just talked about it bookless. When we are out of position, we want to use a smaller overbet. Yes, I mean, like no problem. Andre is asking, what's the difference between 110% versus pot? Isn't it the same thing? Yes, I mean, like if you use a 90% pot size bet, 110, it won't make much difference. What I want to just highlight is that don't make it too big. We still want to be betting a polarized range, but we want to keep control of the pot. So like betting like 150 here or 175, I think would be a pretty big mistake. Yep. Okay. So we can see here, again, like we bet something like 30%, ace 10 plus, and then some bluffs. I mean, again, like it's just the same thing. So like, that's why like I'm not going to spend so much time here, because it's basically the same thing as in position, and the same concept actually applies. And the differences, I mean, we're going to be talking about it right now. Now on the jack of spade turn, like we talked about when the flush gets there, it's not a great turn card, so we should size down. Now, what sizing exactly would you guys pick here, for example, with the jack of spade there? So yeah, so in position, when the flush got there, like we're using something around 2/3 pot or 3/4, but like we were not overbetting. So again, now we are out of position. We see that there's a lot of block betting going on, especially on flush turn. So like there's a lot of blocking, like 1/3 going, especially on this on some turn cards. Andre, like if you want to, like that's what I'm saying here. Like if you want to size up and bet something like 50% or 60%, I think it's fine. It's quite surprising. Like we see that like on the button versus big blind, like it only prefers like a 2/3 sizing. But we see that like once we get to the blind versus blind situation, like it's mostly going to be the block betting going on. So again, this is kind of the same concept that I've been talking about. Like when we're out of position, we have to keep control of the pot. So like we're going to be blind versus blind. We're going to be out of position. The turn card is bad. We don't want to be building a big pot. So we don't want to be building a big pot. And as you can see, like it's still betting a hand like ace-7 suited, right? Ace-6, ace-3 is 2 pair. Is it betting a jack? Not really. So I mean, it's still betting some like really like some top pair, even the weaker ones to a small block bet. Obviously, if you just block betting means 1/3 pot, just a smaller sizing, David. So I mean, yes, Andre. So 50% and 33% have typically like the same EV. It doesn't matter. It's like if you feel like if you tell me, hey man, like I want to use like a 55% sizing or a 33. I think all the strategies are fine. It won't make a lot of difference. But using like in general, when you're trying to choose between multiple sizes, try to pick the one that will put him in more trouble, so in tougher spot. So you're putting his marginal hands into a tougher spot. So for example here, if we 2x spot here, like do we put his like ace-5 into a tough spot? No. I mean, he just has to fold, right? If we bet like a pot size with his like jack-10, do we put him in a tough spot? We don't. So we need to find like whenever the sizing is on the smaller side, or there's a couple sizings that you're not sure of, or that it's mixing between like, I don't know, the 33 and the 50, always try to pick the sizing that is the smallest, because he's going to be making the most mistakes versus that. All right, so now the next situation here is we are opening small blind, big blind call. Turn is the 10-10 deuce flush draw. So we are betting the flop. We would never use an overbet on the turn here. Like on paired cards, especially blind versus blind, like he's still going to have a bunch of trips. We're out of position. We want to keep control of the pot. So we will always use a regular sizing there. Again, if we were on the button, turn is a deuce, like we saw that like on the 8-8 deuce, 8-8 deuce turn 4, we use something like 2/3 pot. Now the sizing shifts from 2/3 to being a lot of like 1/3 and block betting. So keeping control of the pot is quite important as well, and we still want to be betting fairly wide on blank. So here I posted a screenshot of the entire. So basically, like you see the board at the top, 10-10 deuce, and those like what you see here. Are there any of you guys that aren't familiar with this specific image, or have no idea what it is? Yes. So it's every possible turn for that specific board. So like the 10-10 deuce flush draw, right? If the 3 of clubs gets there, we're checking 42 point, like right here, right? Whoops. Sorry. So we're checking 43% of the time on the 3 of clubs. We're going to be checking 30% of the time on the 10 of clubs. So you can see that like on different turns, the overall strategy that we should be using. So it's especially like efficient to see like what type of sizing it prefers on which type of cards. So you could see that like on like the deuce through through 8, for example, like we're betting at a pretty high frequency. Like we're still betting like 50% of the time. And we can see that like the small sizing, like the block bet is used quite often. So we see that like especially blind versus blind, we want to be even sizing down even more than when we are on the button versus in position. Again, on let's say a turn 3 of clubs, you tell me, okay, I want to be betting something like 2/3 pot or 50% pot instead of block betting. I think it's totally fine. It's totally up to you. But if you actually use a really big overbet, I think that's a big mistake, because you have to be thinking about 10-10 deuce turn 3. Do I still want to be betting wide? The answer is yes. You're still going to be betting 10x. You're still going to be betting hands like pocket 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s to just deny equity from his overcard. So the sizing that you want to be using is a regular sizing. And in this case, since we're out of position and blind versus blind, it shifts towards the 1/3 pot type of sizing. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, like this is a bit like, I don't remember like who asked the question, but he told me like on 8-8 deuce turn king, like are we betting like as wide or whatever? But we can see that like the higher turns get checked at a higher frequency than the lower turns. I mean, if you're playing against a weaker player or recreational, are you guys really using only 1/3 sizing? No. I mean, you're going to be betting like 1/3 pot with 4s. You're going to be betting like pot size bet with ace-10. You know, like you're just going to be betting and playing your hand, obviously. But what we're trying to do is build a good solid foundation. And then once you see, you always have to take a look into the player, and then you see, okay, what type of player he is. Like, am I facing this guy regularly? Like, am I playing this guy every day? Am I in a small pool that this type of spots will come up quite often? If the answer is yes, then we have to be thinking about our ranges a bit more. And then if he's better, obviously the same thing. But like if you're playing 50 or 25 NL and the player pool is freaking like 500 people, I mean, like this spot will come up maybe in 2 weeks, right? Like against the same player in the same situation, the same board texture. So you have to think about your default strategy and build a solid one, but you're going to have to deviate from that strategy much more. That default strategy will get more handy the higher you go. But I mean, you still have to build a solid default strategy in order to know where to deviate. Does that make sense to everybody?